Grandpa wore his suit to dinner.
Team, hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to my garage. Friday, sun's out. It's a good day to change the oil and the spark plug and the air filter and sharpen the blade on a John Deere JX75 push mower. And that's what we're going to do today with my neighbor Ben. So without further ado, let's take a trip next door.
He would level on the level. He shaved even every door and voted for Eisenhower.
All right, Ben, tell us about your mower.
This is a 2002 John Deere JX75. My dad bought it for me when we moved into this house in 2003. It's been a great mower for us, but it's kind of in real need of a tune-up.
So what are we going to do today?
Well, the plan for today was to replace the air filter. We also want to replace the spark plug. We're going to change the oil. And then the last thing that we should do is sharpen the blade.
All right, what kind of tools do we have laid out?
Well, if you take a look over here, I have this old, it's actually a tool you can use if you don't have a ratchet set that will allow you to remove the spark plug. I got this here if we want to use it. I've got a new spark plug. Then we have, I hooked up two ratchets. One will be used to take the spark plug off and to put a new one on. This one is going to be used to take the bolts off on the bottom of the mower so we can remove the blade and reattach it. This I learned is called an end wrench from Mr. Meyer. And we're going to use that to loosen the bolt so we can put new oil in. Here's our air filter. Here's our oil. And then you brought this over.
Yeah, that's penetrating oil or penetrating spray that you can use to get the. I'm afraid those bolts on the blade are going to be seized up, so we'll use some penetrating oil on those first and let them sit and loosen up for a while. All right, let's do it. All right, so first the air filter. The air filter lives in here in this housing with the cover that's attached by this wing nut or secured by this wing nut. As that's coming off, right underneath your air filter housing is your carburetor, right? Here's our old filter.
Pretty dirty, huh?
There's a bunch of grass and stuff on there. These air filters have like a foam. It's kind of like a pre-filter, right? So you got the foam, and then underneath that you've got the pleated paper filter medium. So that the foam is kind of a coarse filter, and then you get down to the fine filter with the paper. So if you look down here, you're looking into your carburetor. And then your carburetor, your air comes in, and here's your black fuel line that's coming in from the gas tank. And then your carburetor, remember, mixes your air and fuel and sends it into your engine.
I'm going to place a new one. All right, snug. It fits right on there real well. Take that same nut, just tighten it.
Okay, plug next. Disconnect the spark plug wire and the boot. Get that socket on there. This is on a 1/2-inch drive ratchet. I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you just pulled out a regular deep socket. Is that right?
That's correct.
So remember, they also make what's called a spark plug socket, designed specifically for pulling out spark plugs, that has like a neoprene boot on the inside to sort of snugly hold the this ceramic part of the spark plug. And then also here inside let's see if we can see it. Inside of that boot, there's kind of a spring so that it fits snugly on the end of your plug. When you snug this spark plug in, I'm sure there's a torque spec for it, but as long as you just get it fairly snug with your ratchet, that's sufficient. If you look in here, where the spark plug came out of, remember, that's looking down through your head into the top of your cylinder. So now here goes the new one in. It's always a good idea to start these by hand and make sure that you're threaded correctly. These heads are made out of aluminum, which is a softer metal, right? And if you get it cross-threaded in there, if you just put it in with your socket and just start cranking it right away, there's a chance that you'll cross-thread it and that could strip out the aluminum fairly easily. So it's a good idea to start those by hand. If it's in a place, like if you're doing it in your car and it's in a place you can't reach, or at least can't reach well, it's not a bad idea to put like a piece of rubber tubing on that spark plug and get it down into place, and then you can twist the tubing, and that's, you know, that's sort of the equivalent of twisting it by hand if you can't reach to where you can get your fingers on it to twist. And we're just going to stick this boot back on, nice and snug, and that's it for a spark plug. Let's see that old one. So the old one, it doesn't look to be in too bad a shape. It doesn't look like that electrode is eroded too badly or anything. There's a little carbon buildup on it, obviously, but it doesn't look like too much oil or too much carbon. It looks pretty darn clean, really, for a mower this old. So that's good. Okay, to drain the oil on this mower, we've got this interesting oil outlet with this brass fitting that you can attach a hose onto, which we did, and then you loosen it up, and there comes the oil out. So the oil is going to run out of there and through this hose into our oil drain pan. And that's just draining out by gravity. This is the first time I've ever seen one of these. I mean, this is one of the, I shouldn't say the first time I've ever seen it, but this is more of an exception than a customary way of draining oil out of a lawnmower. Usually you just have a bolt on the underside of the mower deck, on the bottom of the oil pan, that just comes out and then it just drains out that way. This is kind of nice. When this is done draining, we'll just tighten that thing back up and drain the rest of the oil out of the hose. It's a nice and clean way to do it. As Ben is doing that, I'm going to reach up here, take out the oil dipstick. That's going to let off some of the vacuum a little bit, not a whole lot. So there's our oil dipstick, which we'll use to check it when we fill it back up. Sometimes letting some of that pressure out of the crankcase will let the oil come out a little more quickly. Kind of like, I want to say like shotgunning a beer, but it's more like opening the can of orange juice or whatever. You know, you put the second hole in there and it lets the air come in to replace the oil. All right, you don't need to sit here and watch oil drain. We'll catch you in a second. So here's the oil drained out. The owner's manual says it wants to take 20 ounces. Looks like we've got a little bit less than that in the pan. And Ben thinks he was probably overdue to get it changed. So it could be that it's used some oil. Either way, we're going to get it filled up to where it wants to be. Remember, to figure out where it wants to be, you're going to look at your oil dipstick, which, pull that thing out, Ben. So we're going to add the oil in the dipstick hole. And then as we add it, we'll check it. You see it says full, and you got that little hash marked area, and at the bottom it says add. So we'll bring it right up to that full line. We've got our funnel here.
We'll forgive you. We'll forgive each other till we both turn blue. Then we'll whistle and go fishing in heaven. We'll whistle and go fishing in heaven. We'll whistle and go fishing in heaven.
Oil bottle, the backside of it has a clear spot right here, and that'll, if we hold that flat, that'll tell us how many ounces are left in there. So what was it, 32 ounce bottle? So we've got
12. We've used 20 ounces probably.
Oh, so we should be right on the money right now. So let's let it sit for a minute, and then we'll check it one more time with the dipstick. All right, it's tricky to tell in the light, but it looks like right at the F, on the left side of the F line. So we're going to call it good. Remember, on a small engine like this, you don't want to overfill the oil. If you do, the bottom of the crankshaft is going to slosh through the oil in the bottom of the block, and it's going to make it frothy, right? It's going to bring those air bubbles up, which you don't want. So it's better to, you don't want to be under full either, but you definitely don't want to be overfilled. Okay, we're going to flip it upside down next and take off the blade. Next, we're taking off this blade. Ben's going to hit it with this PB blaster, penetrating oil first. We cleaned some of the grass off of those bolts earlier, just so the socket would fit on. What is that? What size is that?
This is a 5/8.
5/8, and he's on a 3/8 drive ratchet. So you see, as he turns it, it's wanting to turn the blade too, right? So I think what we're going to do is call a timeout, and I'm going to run back and get my leather gloves and hold on to the blade, and then Ben can crank it loose. Okay, try number 2. I've got some leather gloves. I'm going to hold on to this blade while Ben slips the old metal pipe over the end of that ratchet and really cranks on it. I think we just broke that loose.
Sure did. There we go.
All right, let's break the other one loose while I'm up here. Then you can just crank them out. Stick that pipe on the end of the wrench and gives you a good amount more leverage.
Absolutely.
But also, of the several types of gloves that we talked about using and not using in the shop, this is a great time to use like a heavy leather glove, right? This rascal, instead of our latex oil changing gloves. So on this mower, so behind the blade, sometimes your blade will just screw directly into the bottom of your crankshaft. On this one, that's not the case. There's a this mower has a clutch, so you can, once the engine's running, you can engage and disengage the blade. So that's what's bolted in here. That's if you would remove this. Sorry, if you'd remove this with your Allen wrench, you would get that's screwed into the bottom of your crankshaft, and then you've got this clutch assembly to turn the blade on and off. Okay, we're gonna walk this blade over to my garage. We're gonna stick it in the vise. And we're gonna get it sharpened.
I've been thinking lately about
So over in my garage, we've got the blade secured here in the vise. You can sharpen this a number of ways, right? You can sharpen it with an angle grinder. You can sharpen it on a bench grinder. The only trouble with doing it with a mechanical grinder like that is that you run the risk of getting this metal really hot from the friction. And if it gets hot, and then if it gets too hot, if it gets orange or red hot and then cools slowly, you run the risk of it softening the metal, which will make it less likely to hold its edge. The best way to do this, in my opinion, is to do it with a file. A flat file or a mill file. If you haven't caught episode 5.5 yet, the tool interlude, I talk about the different kinds of files. This particular one is a what you call a bastard cut mill file. So it's flat on this end, right? And it's flat on the sides. It's a rectangular cross section with a sort of a moderate tooth. It's not super coarse, but it's also not too fine to make a difference. We're going to find the edges at the areas of this blade where it wants to be sharpened, which looks like this spot right here, and then the same thing over here on the opposite side. And other than that, it's just square. So basically, we've only got to sharpen 6 or 8 inches of blade. So I want to match this bevel with my file. Remember your file, a single cut file like this one is only going to cut on the push stroke. So just push and cut and then bring it out, kind of like a hacksaw. You can tell you're matching that bevel if you've made it shiny all the way across, right? If it's only shiny up here on the top, you're too much like this. If it's only shiny back here on the back, you're too much like this. You want to match it. I'm going to call that good. This does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be sharp enough to cut paper, right? I think for the most part, it's the velocity of your blade that's cutting the grass and not the super keen edge. I think if you get it sharpened up a little bit, it definitely helps the cleanliness of your cut, but it doesn't need to be knife sharp. And in fact, if you have too fine an edge on there, it's going to dull probably more quickly. All right, so I'll flip this around and do it again. We'll go put it back.
fishing in a heaven.
Okay, we'll get those bolts back in. All right, I started it.
Black and white and pink with blades blue that lay between the words I put for the page. I was in the silver, you couldn't tell that you break my heart the way I wanted when I started writing stuff.
Just like that, the JX75 has its spring tune-up. I should make a note that we'll take that old oil and pour it from the drain pan into the container that the good oil, the new oil came in, and we'll take that and recycle it at any of the local auto parts stores. They'll take your used oil. It's way better to do that than to just dump it out in the driveway in the gravel or whatever. A special thanks after episode 6 goes out to my neighbor Ben, the world's finest neighbor. I'll see you over the backyard fence in just a little bit. The rest of you all, I hope you enjoyed it. That's what we did here today. Hope you're doing something similar today in the sun, and that you're working on something productive, and that you're enjoying yourself, and that you all are staying healthy and well. Hope you enjoyed episode 6. We'll catch you soon.